Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day and I'm CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, and we're specialist payroll and HR recruiters. Now, they say the quieter we are, the more we hear, and that listening is the secret to discovering the greatest of stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's fantastic guest. Today, I have a special guest, Nicole Behne. Now, she is someone who creates workplace solutions for people who are hard of hearing, also known as HOH. One thing I'd be really interested to know, Nicole, in your experience, you worked on in boardrooms, in manufacturing floors, I mentioned in the introduction there. What's it like to navigate a typical day in your work life as someone who does have hearing loss, and does it differ significantly from someone who does have normal hearing?
Absolutely, it does. You know, I recently thought like having hearing loss, Nick, described as doing crossword puzzles, Sudoku, and Scrabble, playing that game all at the same time. So when you have a hearing loss, you're constantly filling in the blanks of what you hear and what you don't hear. So yes, you're missing things in meetings all the time and trying to infer what you heard. You can't hear the drive-by hallway conversations that happen at the workplace. The lunchroom brings a whole nother level of anxiety because you've got microwaves going and refrigerators running and people talking all around, and it makes it really hard to focus on one conversation or carry on a conversation with all of that background noise. Even sitting in your cube, there's problems with that as well, because people can walk up behind you and ask you a question or start talking to you, and you have no idea, because as a person with hearing loss, I can't hear what's happening behind me. And actually, when I moved into a different location at my office space earlier in my career, if someone would walk up and start talking to me from behind, the person next to me caught on that I wasn't hearing those conversations, and she would stand up over her cube and get my attention visually, and she'd say, "Nicole, Joe's here behind you to say hi." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And so then I would turn around and look, and I would know someone was there. But I mean, those are just really simple examples of, of how it's different. And the meeting space specifically it's been really tough, Nick. You'll see people with hearing loss, and I can pick them out in meetings. I know who they are. I see them because they're more reserved. I know they have things to share, but they're leaning in. I see the lean in with the turn to maybe their good ear, leaning into the conference room table. They're looking around. And as I do, sometimes it looks like I'm watching a flippin' tennis match because I have to see who's speaking in those meeting rooms, but they're looking around. And I think that, sometimes people with hearing loss in those meetings are afraid to ask questions because they're not sure what was just said at the other side of the table. And it maybe was already covered. And that's bit me a few times too, where I've asked questions that were already asked because I didn't hear the conversation that was taking place in that big meeting room.
What other kind of accessibility tools are out there in the public domain that would be very easy for an HR team or for a leadership team to bring into the workplace that would just make someone who has got loss of hearing, make their lives a little bit easier, that perhaps they don't have to be overly expensive, or probably readily available, such as the captioning on Zoom, which we're using right now, which I was never aware of until we had this show. Are there other accessibility things that people need to be more aware of to make sure that they are creating more inclusive workplaces?
Absolutely. And you actually hit the nail on the head with the video captioning that's available. So when the world shut down in 2019 or 2020 from COVID-19, we all switched to video conferencing, right? Which was actually a blessing for me because everyone was now looking at me all the time and I could read their lips. And I went from catching maybe 50% of what was being said in meetings to 90+%. We know these live captions aren't always accurate, but I'm filling in so many less blanks than I have been before. So that's one thing that people can easily do in meetings: flip their laptop up, start a Teams or Zoom, whatever video conferencing platform they have, and turn on the live captions. Now, what makes it even better is if the meeting room you are in is wired with microphones throughout, then you can tap into the technology in that meeting space, and those microphones will feed the captions on your computer, and that is fantastic because your computer doesn't have as wide of a reach. Another thing that's really easy, and it's a little bit more recent, but all of iPhones and Androids now have live captioning built into their software. So you can go into your settings and accessibility and turn on live captions. And at all times on my phone, I have a live caption option where it streams the conversations that are happening. And it is fantastic. I was going to show you here, but it's fantastic because this will just run the conversation that's happening. Again, you're limited by the pickup from the microphone of your tool here, of your phone. But those are on, like I said, both Android and iPhones right now today. The other thing that, as you think about some of the easy fixes, if you will, is really around spatial awareness. So when I walk into a meeting room, there's so many things that go through my mind that don't go through the minds of someone who has normal hearing. I'm thinking about who's going to be doing most of the talking in that meeting and how do I position myself to make sure I can hear them. I'm also thinking about who is most people going to be doing the talking to. So if there's a senior leader in that meeting that everyone will be presenting to, I want to place myself by them because that's where all the sound projections will be aimed.
Oh.
The other thing is there are certain spaces that have loud fans, background noises that just don't work for me. So ahead of time, if I know a meeting is scheduled in a room that's not good, I will ask that meeting scheduler to move to a different room where I know those acoustics are better. So when you think about spatial awareness in the meeting rooms, it's really walking the space and seeing what's available and where you can position yourself to have the most success. But I will say the one thing that is the most impactful is awareness. And the more people I have told about my hearing loss, the more inclusive they try to be. And it kind of takes away all of the negative stigma, if you will, around having a hearing loss. And I've learned throughout my journey, my hearing loss journey, that it is so much more important for me to be honest and open about what my needs are from a communication perspective than to try to hide it, because that can lead to some really some friction and strained personal relationships along the way, versus saying, I didn't hear you and I need to hear you. So this is what we should do differently. Even so much so in meetings, when you do introductions and you go around and say who you are and what your position is, I often start mine out with, hi, I'm Nicole. I have a hearing loss and I need you to speak up in this meeting. Things will change a little bit from a normal meeting because if I don't hear you, I'm going to ask you to repeat yourself. And you may see me walking around the room, and it's not to be distracted, but it's to make sure that I can hear the conversations that are happening from different spots in this conference room. So I'm open at the front of those meetings to let people know that it's going to look a little bit different with me in the room. And that has helped more than anything. People want to help. They want to be my wingmen and make sure that, that I'm getting what I need from a communication perspective.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, your energy, your passion, your confidence actually in this subject area shines through. And hopefully anyone else that is worried about stigma or worried about confidence or have anxiety about this, hopefully, just listening to this show and reading the notes of this show, they'll get that confidence to be able to speak up as you have. And hopefully they'll experience the same level of inclusivity that you've had by raising that awareness. With that in mind, tell me a little bit more about World Hearing Day, because you brought it to my consciousness. I wasn't familiar with it before I met yourself. And how does that work or apply to hearing inclusion?
Yeah, so I think now is the time that we bring World Hearing Day down to the conference room table and start talking about hearing loss inclusion in the workplace. This day is one day of many days on the calendar year, right? But if we can all make a conscious effort to say, there's World Hearing Day, what are we doing in our organization? How are we thinking differently about the inclusivity around the employees in our workforce that are hard of hearing? What can we do differently? I'm also using World Hearing Day as a springboard to launch hearing inclusion inclusion and to offer services for companies today. What I can do is come in for a speaking engagement where I help raise awareness, and we talk about the statistics on hearing loss. What is hearing loss? Like you asked right away in the beginning, how does it impact the coworkers? What is the mental health implications associated with that? And what are the tips for effective communication with hearing loss? So that's part of the awareness piece. And then secondly, the workshops, like we talked about, it's so important to go in and do the assessments and say, where's our starting point with hearing inclusion today? What needs to change in this organization? Like I said, it can be at the cube, it can be in the meeting spaces, but to put that action plan together, and it has to be specific and customized for each organization because meeting rooms and technologies are all different. But let's use World Hearing Day to start the conversation. Let's use World Hearing Day to continue to every year have that conversation in the workforce.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, and remember, every great conversation starts with great listening. Till next time.